Okay, good morning, everybody. This is going to be one of our first sessions of writers' workshops that Miss Mavericks sent you guys an email about. Writers' workshop sessions are going to be hosted by every English teacher from the English department here at Impact Academy over the next several weeks. They will be offered in combinations of webinars and live lessons. So here is what you need to know. Between now and the beginning of EOCs, each English teacher in our English department is going to offer a variety of different topics that you guys can choose to attend. I would encourage you to choose topics, writing topics that you are struggling with. So for example, today's topic is on organization. We're particularly going to focus on pre-writing and how to create an outline and a thesis statement. If this is something you struggle with, then this is definitely a workshop that you need to attend. If that is not something that you struggle with, you may want to consider choosing a topic that is more suited for you or something that you are struggling with. You can choose to attend either live lessons or webinars in any combination. You must attend at least 2 between now and the beginning of EOCs. If you have any questions about the writers' workshop sessions that we're going to be hosting over the next several weeks, then certainly you can contact any of your English teachers and we can give you some details and guidance about what you should do. So let's go ahead and get started. As I mentioned, today's writers' workshop is going to focus on organization. There's going to be a live lesson hosted on campus tomorrow from 2 to 3 p.m. that will cover the same topic, and I will be hosting that as well, Ms. Joyner. You do not have to attend both, so if you choose to do this session via webinar video, then you do not have to come to the live lesson tomorrow. Or if this is a topic that you particularly struggle with and you would like some FaceTime to sit down with me, then certainly I will see you tomorrow at the live lesson. Okay? So if you look down at the bottom of the screen, you can see the pathway to finding things on my website. So if I refer to visiting my website during this presentation, this is what I'm talking about. To find my website or any teacher's website, you're going to go to the Impact Academy website and then click on Teachers, and then you will find that teacher's name. In this case, it's me, Miss Joyner. I have a YouTube channel, and this video is going to be posted to my YouTube channel. I'm going to share the link out to everyone via SIS, but you can also find it on my website, posted on my YouTube channel. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Just as an overview, here is a quick review of what the writing process as a whole looks like. You have your pre-write, which is where you examine your prompt and organize your essay. You have a rough draft where you put down your first thoughts and start to actually craft your essay. Then your next step is to revise. Revising is where you improve ideas, add support to your paper, make clarifications to your thoughts. Then you have editing, where you actually focus on things like grammar and mechanics. And then your final step of the writing process is, of course, your final draft. We are not looking at all of these steps today. The only step that we are going to look at is the very first one, your pre-writing. I feel very strongly about having a solid pre-write for students. The number one complaint that I hear from kids when we assign an essay is, I never know what to write. If you are that person that gets stuck when you start an essay because you get writer's block, or maybe you do really well at the beginning, but then you get stuck in the middle at some point and you get frustrated, then the problem is almost certainly not that you are not a good writer. The problem is almost certainly that your pre-write was not sufficient, because that first step in pre-writing, where you provide the organization for your paper, will save you so much frustration as you are crafting that essay. It will help a lot to decrease episodes of writer's block. So here are the things that we need to do for a pre-write. A good pre-write should take you approximately 15 or 20 minutes in your essay writing process to create. The first thing you're going to do is read and analyze the prompt, which we're going to do together. I'm going to show you a sample prompt. I'm actually going to walk through a pre-write with you all the way from beginning to end. The next thing you want to do is create a RAFTS. If you haven't heard of a RAFTS, then I'm going to explain to you what it is. It's a way to make sure that you have analyzed the prompt and that you are writing on the correct topic. The next step is to create a thesis statement. We're going to do this together. And then your final step is just a simple basic outline to guide you as you write. So let's go ahead and get started. I've given a sample prompt that we're going to look at together, and we're going to create a pre-write for. The sample prompt is below. 2016 is an election year in the USA. Americans across the country will cast ballots to choose a new president, new senators, new state representatives, and make many important decisions about the laws in their local districts as well. Currently, voting is the right of every U.S. citizen over the age of 18, but there has been discussion in recent history of raising the voting age to 21. In a letter to your state senator, write about your opinion of this issue. Should the voting age be raised to 21? Provide evidence to support your opinion. So this is a sample prompt. It's a pretty typical prompt. As you can see, it gives you some background information about the issue that you're being presented with, and then it asks you towards the end to either present your opinion or to present information. And as we analyze this prompt, there's some important language that we're going to pick out. For example, I can tell immediately that this is an argumentative prompt. If we look at that final sentence, it is specifically asking you for your opinion. So we know that this is argumentative. I'd also like to insert here that when you do read and analyze a prompt, the best thing that you can do as a reader, if you have access to this, is to make sure that you understand every word in that prompt. So, for example, if you were not sure what the word representative meant, you could not explain that out loud, you couldn't give somebody a definition for that, then take a few minutes, and especially when you're creating an essay in a course and you have access to the internet or access to print materials and reference materials at home or here on campus, make sure that you're using those resources so that you're sure you really understand what that prompt is asking you. So if I were confused about what the word representative meant, or maybe I kind of knew what it meant but I couldn't really explain it out loud, then just to make sure that I understood what was going on, I would look that word up. So don't be afraid to pick out words that aren't familiar for you and look them up. That's totally okay with a prompt, okay? I always recommend that you read a prompt at least twice, okay? At least twice. I know when you first get that prompt, you're ready to get that essay over with, so you read it, you read it as quickly as possible so that you can get started. But I would recommend reading it twice and looking up any unfamiliar words that you may find. A RAFTS. If you have been in my English class, then you have definitely heard of a RAFTS. We have a little mini project that we do with them. If not, it may be something that you have heard of, and it may not be. RAFTS is an acronym. An acronym is where we take a long process and come up with the first initials to stand for that process. So RAFTS stands for role, audience, format, topic, and strong verb. That's what it stands for. Your role, or that R in RAFTS, is who you are writing as. Who are you writing as? You have a lot of different interests as a writer. You may, for example, or in a lot of different roles in your life. Many of you are students. You may be a son or a daughter. You're a citizen of this country. You're a citizen of the state of Georgia. All of those things are you, but you are probably going to present yourselves in different ways depending on which one of those roles you are writing as. So in our sample prompt, it asks you to write as a young citizen of the United States. That's who you are writing as. We're going to take a closer look at that in just a minute when we fill this raft out. The second part of a raft is the audience. Who are you writing to? And this is a big deal because it's going to dictate what kind of language you use. For example, when you are writing something for a friend or for someone who is your age, you may use more informal language. Whereas if you are writing to someone who you haven't met or someone who is older, someone in a position of authority, we're going to make sure that we use more formal language. For example, if you were to send me, if you were in my class and you and I know each other very well, you may send me a quick message in the SIS to ask me a question, and your language would be polite, of course, but it may not be as formal as it would be if you were writing to a teacher that you didn't know or an administrator or something like that. Okay? So audience is always very important to consider. Who are you writing to? This is particularly important with an argumentative prompt because obviously you want to consider your audience so that you can convince them that you are right. You're going to think about what that audience wants to hear or needs to hear to be convinced that your opinion is the correct one. Format is the next part of a raft. What type of writing are you doing? For years before I taught high school, I taught middle school, and there was an 8th grade writing test that some of you probably remember. One of the big boo-boos that I saw kids make on those state writing tests was not taking into account what type of writing they were being asked to do. So the sample prompt that we just looked at and that we're going to see again in a second, asks you to write a letter. You're not writing an essay, you're writing a letter. And so that would mean that you would have all the formatting that you would need for a letter. You would have a heading, you would have the body formatted the way a letter would be, and of course you would include a signature and a closing of a letter. On those state writing tests, I had several prompts that may be called for letters or essays or speeches. There can be all different types of formats that you're asked to write in. And if a student didn't take into account that format, then they would lose points. And the same is true for an essay that you write for class or for any occasion or any type of writing that you do. You always want to take into account the format. What type of writing are you being asked to do? You can't ignore that. The T in RAF stands for topic. Is your topic informative or argumentative? That's going to make a big difference in how you choose to write. So always pay attention. For this prompt, the sample prompt that we just saw, it's pretty clear that it's an argumentative prompt. But you are going to get different kinds depending on what prompt you get. So make sure you pay attention to that. A strong verb. A strong verb is going to be in your thesis statement, which we'll look at in a minute. And a strong verb is going to make your argument or your thesis statement sound more mature and more and stronger and more forceful. So, of course, we want to convince our audience. So again, here is our sample prompt. I'm going to read it one more time, and then I'm going to show you a filled out copy of our RAFTS for this prompt. 2016 is an election year in the USA. Americans across the country will cast ballots to choose a new president, new senators, new state representatives, and make many important decisions about the laws in their local districts as well. Currently, voting is the right of every U.S. citizen over the age of 18, but there has been discussion in recent history of raising the voting age to 21. In a letter to your state senator, write about your opinion of this issue. Should the voting age be raised to 21? Provide evidence to support your opinion. So here is our filled out RAFTS. Our role for this prompt is as a young American citizen, a pre-voter, somebody who is not voting yet. Your audience is your state senator. That's who you are writing to. Your format or the type of writing that you are doing is a letter. Your topic is argumentative. And a strong or a couple of strong verbs that you could use would be that you advocate for this or that you argue for this. I would suggest if you have trouble coming up with strong verbs to use a thesaurus. So you can write your thesis statement sort of as is and then look at the verb in your thesis statement and use a thesaurus to find stronger, more specific verbs that you could replace in that thesis statement. Speaking of thesis statement, a thesis statement, as many of you know, states your opinion or the main idea, if you're going to be doing an informative writing, and provides us like a structure or a map for your essay. It lets your audience know what you're going to discuss. I would argue that a thesis statement is probably the single most important thing that you can do to make sure that you don't get writer's block. Here's an example of a thesis statement that I just came up with for the topic that we are using as our sample. I would like to argue that the current voting age should not be raised to 21 because young voters have issues that they would like addressed, and young voters should become invested in the process at as early an age as possible. So the first part of the thesis that we see, I would like to argue that the current voting age should not be raised to 21, is the position or the side that I am choosing. That is my opinion, okay? The second part of the thesis statement is what actually gives us the map of the ideas that we're going to discuss. So I have two reasons that I think that the voting age should not be raised to 21. I think that young voters have issues that they would like addressed. That's the first thing I'm going to talk about in my first body paragraph. And the second body paragraph of my paper, I'm going to discuss how young voters should become invested in the voting process as early as they possibly can. So you can see that I've sort of given you a summary of where my paper is going in one efficient sentence. And that's what a thesis statement does. A piece of advice that I'm going to give you. The two reasons that you see in my thesis statement here represent two paragraphs, and I'm going to show you how that lays out when we look at our outline in a minute. Every essay that you write, or every piece of writing that you do, in this instance it's a letter, at the high school level should be between 4 and 6 paragraphs long. So if you are given an essay prompt in Edgenuity, or you're given a project by a teacher, and you have to write a paper or a speech or an essay, your minimum length is going to be 4 to 6 paragraphs. So the number of body paragraphs that you have are going to depend on how many reasons or topics that you introduce in your thesis statement. If I wanted to, here, this paper is going to have 4 paragraphs, and I'm doing that strictly for the length of this video lesson for the purposes of that, okay? But I could have up to 6 paragraphs, so I could add 2 more reasons to this thesis statement if I chose to. The other piece of advice that I want to give you about a thesis statement is to make sure, and this is so important, make sure that all of your reasons are very different from each other, because they're all going to be paragraphs translated into paragraphs that are different topics. So if you have reasons that are very close together and you start trying to put those different reasons into different paragraphs, but they're very similar to each other, this is how writer's block happens. This is how you get stuck. Since your ideas aren't very different from each other, you start to repeat yourself and you get stuck and frustrated. So for example, my 2 reasons are, again, that young voters have issues that they would like addressed, and that young voters should become invested in the process. Those are 2 very different thoughts and very different ideas. However, if one of my reasons, if I changed my second reason and said young voters have issues that they would like addressed, and young voters are concerned about the rising cost of college, well, those are really kind of the same thing. My first reason talks about issues that they have, and then my second reason really isn't different. It just gives an example of that first reason. So you really want to make sure that your two reasons are very different from each other so you don't start repeating yourself in the body of your paper. So here is sort of a basic outline, basic. When you do an outline, you're not writing in big, long, complete sentences. This is not the time to include every word of every paragraph. Your outline and your rough draft are different, okay? Your outline is the skeleton, it's the map. An outline should not take you, like I said, more than maybe 10 minutes to complete. It's strictly a guide. Okay, this is what I'm going to talk about first. This is what I'm going to talk about next. Okay, so we're going to look at each one of these sections really briefly. So as you can see, you have your Roman numerals on the left-hand side of the screen that stand for the different paragraphs. So your first paragraph is your introduction. Your second paragraph is the body paragraph number 1. The third paragraph is body paragraph number 2. And then our final paragraph will be, of course, the conclusion. Remember, all essays should be between 4 and 6 paragraphs in length. So make sure that when you submit an essay, a speech, a letter, or any kind of writing assignment at the high school level, unless specifically told otherwise, you are expected to submit between 4 and 6 well-crafted paragraphs for those assignments. Again, today we're doing 4 just for the sake of time. So let's take a closer look at each one of these sections. For your introduction, there are 2 things that will really help you if you jot them down, and they don't have to be perfect. Again, an outline is not a rough draft, so it doesn't have to be completely detailed. But if you wanted to come up with these things for your introduction on your outline, it would make your life a lot easier when you start creating that rough draft. I always encourage students to go ahead and come up with their opening statement. This is really hard for some people, and I completely understand why it would be. Sometimes getting started is the hardest part. So if you kind of come up with an idea of this at the outlining phase, it keeps you from staring at that rough draft when you go to get started and not getting very far. So the opening statement that I came up with is the United States of America should be a country where every citizen has a voice. I would call this an impact statement. Okay, it's a strong assertion of what I believe. Okay, you can also use, if you're really bad at coming up with opening statements, if that's a sticking point for you, you can also ask a well-crafted question. Obviously, we're considering our audience, so my audience is a state senator, so I wouldn't send a question to a state senator like, do you vote? Because yeah, they do. So you can either come up with a well-crafted question, or you might want to go ahead and look for some outside resources and quote a shocking or important statistic. Okay, 99% of high school students do not believe the voting age should be raised. Something like that. Okay, so those are some suggestions. The second thing that you want to make sure that you put in your outline for your introduction is, of course, your thesis statement, which we've already seen there. So those 2 things, these are not going to be the only 2 things in your introduction. Of course, you're going to have some discussion in between them, right? Your opening statement is the first sentence of your introduction, and your thesis statement is always the final sentence of your introduction, okay? Moving on, let's look at body paragraph number 1. The first thing that you're going to notice here is that this is not a lot of stuff, right? There's not a lot of writing here because typically your thesis statement is the longest sentence that you write during the outlining phase. Outlining is usually just quick ways to jot down your ideas to make sure that your ideas are organized before you begin your rough draft. So you shouldn't have complete paragraphs, or maybe not even necessarily complete sentences, depending on how you choose to outline. So this is my second paragraph of my essay, the first body paragraph. So my first reason that I'm going to discuss in this paragraph is young voters have issues that affect them in particular, and that they would like addressed. That's what I'm going to talk about in this paragraph. That's my topic sentence, okay? Here are the 2 points that I'm going to talk about, and you'll notice that they're just bulleted. I'm going to talk about these 2 issues, the rising cost of college and issues in education, okay? So obviously when I say education, for that second bullet point, I am not talking about college, right? Because I've already talked about that in my first bullet point. So I might talk about, when I say education, the number of tests that are given at high school, in the high school level, or the crowded classrooms, or things like that. So those are some ideas for myself to make sure that I don't repeat myself when I start to discuss the issues that affect young people in that first body paragraph. My second body paragraph, again, this goes with my thesis. So in my thesis, I said the first thing I was going to talk about was issues that affect young people. The second thing that I suggested that I would talk about in my thesis is that young voters should become invested in the process as early as possible. Okay, we want as many young voters to be invested in the voting process as we can, of course. And so the 2 things that I plan to talk about in that paragraph is how apathy is dangerous for democracy. If you don't know what apathy means sort of not caring, not being engaged. So one of the things that I would talk about is how people if we make young people wait too long to vote, they might develop apathy, which means they may not care about the process. They may get busy in their college life and not feel like they're a part of that process. If we leave them out too long and they may not vote, they may never register to vote. So the other thing that I want to talk about in this paragraph is voter energy. If you have followed any of the election coverage this year, you'll notice that when they talk about young voters, they often talk about the energy and the passion that young voters bring to the election when they're allowed to vote. It encourages all groups to vote when you have this high energy and passion that's brought to the table by young voters. So I feel like that's very good for the democratic process, no matter which side you choose to vote for. So that would be one of the things that I would discuss in this second body paragraph here. So you'll notice again that I am making sure, as I am organizing here in my outline, that my topics, I've made sure that my 2 body paragraphs are very different from each other. And you're going to notice that I am making sure that the points that I am bringing up in those body paragraphs are also very different from each other. This is the kind of organization that prevents writer's block, if that's a problem for you. Okay, moving on. My outline, the last paragraph, is going to be my conclusion. So I always feel like there's 2 types of writers. You have the types of writers that really hate the beginning of the paper, and then you have the types of writers that sometimes really hate the end of the paper. So no matter which one you are, I hope some of the suggestions here for organizing will help you out. So as far as a conclusion is concerned, I know that in younger grade levels, you're often just told that a conclusion is a summary of everything that you've talked about. And that can be frustrating for people because they feel like, okay, well, I've already talked about all that stuff. There's got, a summary might take me a sentence, but then I have the rest of this paragraph to fill up, right? So here are some things that you can include in your outline conclusion or in your concluding paragraph that will really help you to not feel like you finish your paper on a weak note. The hallmark of any really great writer, not just a good writer, but a great writer, is a really strong conclusion. So one of the first things that you want to put, obviously, the summary part is correct. You do want to summarize your argument again in your conclusion. So you can see that for my summary I have written, as you can see, there are issues in our country that uniquely affect young voters, and involving young people in the voting process is a vital part of continuing our democracy. Those are the 2 issues that I talked about to support my belief that we should not raise the voting age. Okay, so that's what I put for my summary. So here are the two other things that you may not have considered that you probably want to consider for your conclusion. If you are doing an argumentative essay, you always want to make sure and address your counter argument at some point in your essay. The counter argument is what the opposite side may believe. So, for example, I believe that we should not raise the voting age. The counter argument to that would be that we should raise the voting age. So, I want to make sure and address that for my audience. So, my counter argument says, while some people argue that 18-year-olds are not mature enough to vote, I disagree. So, I'm going to say, I know that some people say this, but I'm going to go ahead and bring that up and say that that's not accurate. So always make sure that you can address, if it's an argumentative essay, you can address your counter argument here. And I wouldn't just write this sentence and then drop it and leave it. Remember, this is an outline, so I am listing bullet points. Each one of these I'm going to stop and discuss and provide evidence for in my paper. Okay. A good way to sort of close out a whole paper or as a final point in a conclusion is to include a personal connection or experience. We call those anecdotes. Anecdotes are short little little stories or allusions to personal experience that make your paper stronger. So my personal connection that I'm going to put here is, as a teacher, I work with intelligent, mature young people every day who deserve to have their voting rights protected. So that would be my closing sentence. That would be my personal connection with this issue that I would include for my audience. So again, this is sort of what an outline looks like, a basic outline, introduction, then your body paragraphs in the middle, and then your conclusion. So you can go back and sort of look through the video if you like to remind yourself what I put under each one of these sections. And just in quick review, organization is a really vital part of any writing piece, whether you're writing an essay or a speech or a letter or even a poem or a story, even a narrative. Organization is going to make your life a lot easier. So just investing that maybe 15 minutes during your pre-writing to organize your paper is a great way to prevent writer's block. So if that's a problem that you have for essays, then this is certainly something that you can do to make your life easier. A solid pre-write includes reading and analyzing the prompt. Remember, we're going to read the prompt at least twice, and we're going to look up any unfamiliar language in the prompt. If you can't define every word that you read in a prompt out loud clearly, then you may want to look up the definition just to sort of give yourself some clarification. You always want to make sure that you are answering the question that you're being asked and that you are answering it completely. So if a prompt has two parts, always make sure that you address both. The other thing that you want to do in a pre-write is a RAFTS. RAFTS, again, this is another way to make sure that you are writing on topic and that you are addressing your topic or your prompt completely. RAFTS stands for role, audience, format, topic, and a strong verb. The next step in the pre-writing process is a solid thesis statement. A solid thesis statement is probably the longest sentence that you're going to write in the outlining process, and it's a map of your paper. It expresses your opinion or your topic, and then it provides the different topics of your body paragraph for your reader. The last step in your pre-writing process is an outline. And again, I showed you that an outline does not have to be an exhaustive process. It should take you around 10 minutes to sort of jot down the different points that you're going to talk about and in what order you're going to do. And remember, during that outlining process, what you're really focused on is making sure that your body paragraphs have different topics and that you're not repeating different supporting ideas within those body paragraphs. Making sure that you come up with clearly different ideas and clearly different topics for your paragraphs are going to keep you from repeating yourself and experiencing that frustration of writer's block. So here is your assignment. You're going to create a prompt, a pre-write for this prompt below. So we had the sample prompt, of course, that we dealt with in this presentation. This is a different prompt that you're going to use. Your pre-write that you're going to create for me should include a RAFTS, a thesis statement, and a brief outline. Remember, this should take you around 15 minutes. It shouldn't be a long, drawn-out process. We are only doing the pre-write. You're not turning this prompt into a full essay. All you're doing is the RAFTS, a thesis statement, and a brief outline. Okay, so you can send this to my teacher email address, my regular email address, amandajoyner@henry.k12.ga.us. You can attach it with a Word document, or if you prefer, you can also just simply type this onto an SIS message if you want and send it to me, to Amanda Joyner. That's me. This is going to be due by this coming Monday, which is October 31st. So if you want credit for attending this particular writer's workshop session, make sure that you either send me a Word document attached to an email or an SIS message with this assignment on it by October 31st. I will be available this evening from 5 to 6 for webinar. If you drop in time, if you would like, you can find my webinar link on my teacher website. You're welcome to stop in if you have questions about this video or your assignment. I'd be happy to help you. And of course, again, we are doing that live lesson tomorrow from 2 to 3 on campus. So if this video left you with some questions and you feel like you want to sit down and work with me, then you're welcome to come in again, either for that drop-in session this evening via webinar or for the live lesson tomorrow. So here is your prompt. This is the prompt that you are going to use to create your pre-write for this assignment. The rising cost of college is a major concern for many young Americans and American families. Do you believe that taxes should be increased on very wealthy Americans to help provide a free college education to young, middle, and working class U.S. citizens? In a brief essay, state your opinion and provide evidence to support your claims. So again, this is your prompt. You are not completing a full essay. Instead, you are only doing the pre-write. So RAFTS, thesis statement, and outline. And this is due by the 31st. You can attach it as a Word document and send it to my Outlook teacher email, or feel free to type it onto an SIS message and submit it that way. Again, if you have any questions, you're welcome to get in touch with me. You're welcome to attend the session this evening, attend the live lesson tomorrow, or come and see me in cafe or schedule a webinar that's convenient for you. Thanks a lot for watching, guys.